All right, so yesterday we got through a lot of content so we could set ourselves up for today. So yesterday I very quickly went by this thing that we talked about yesterday as aggression. I jokingly mocked that I have a lot of aggression, which is not true. But we kind of moved through it very quickly. Today aggression is our major focus of today's conversation, and it's going to be based around one of the most famous experiments of AP of psychology. It has even become a bunch of documentaries. It's become a movie you can watch. I wouldn't suggest it, but you could. It's called the Stanford Prison Experiment. Now, what the Stanford Prison Experiment talks about is a thing called social roles, which we talked about very briefly. Now, social roles are a huge thing in our life, okay? I, for instance, do not socialize with high schoolers. I think you're all great. And I tell you about my life to a degree, but please know, some of the things I tell you aren't true. My sister does not have everything wrong with her, people. Does that upset you to find that out? There's things I make up in order to use as examples of psychology. So you don't know everything about my life because I do protect some of those components to my life. Okay? However, I am, as your teacher, have a place of authority. I think it's important for teachers and students to like each other and interact well, but there should be a line. That is how I maintain my own social role. I like every single one of you, but we ain't going to be friends because it's not important. Social roles is how all of society works. Now, there's teacher and student society. Are any of you people BuzzFeed people? I love BuzzFeed. I know Trump is not a big fan, but I am personally a big fan of BuzzFeed. Today, actually, I just noticed it during third period. They did a huge expose about looking at police brutality, police lies, and how they've covered it, and some of them have gotten caught for it, for lying about their reports and doing things differently than what the report says. Now, this is a very timely piece. Obviously, we talked about Black Lives Matter. We've talked about all these other components of this whole topic. But what that comes from is this whole article is looking at how can police get away with lying? How are police getting away with all of this? And they have 63 cases where they can prove with video that the police report is wrong and the police officer lied about it. Now, are the police the only people who abuse their power? No. The problem with police abusing their power is one of those things that we feel the most violated by, correct? They carry weapons, they're here to protect us, and we feel like if they're not protecting us, then what are they doing? Those types of things. People of all different levels abuse power. Have you ever had a teacher who abuses their power? Who does things and gets away with things because people won't say anything because they don't want their lives tortured every single day? Correct? How many times have you seen that happen? That abuse of power. That's abuse of power. About 2 or 3 years ago, there was a bunch of kids working at a Domino's Pizza. And they bathed in the sink that they were cleaning a bunch of tools they used to make the pizza. And they've recorded themselves licking pizzas, licking all this different stuff because they could. When they were confronted, they said, well, when you order a pizza from Domino's, you're okay with whatever the people at Domino's do to your pizza. Is that an abuse of power? Just because they are making your pizza, do they have every right to sprinkle some things on your pizza? No, they don't. Abuse of power. So it doesn't matter what station of life you are in, whether you're a professional who stands in the front of the room, whether you're a police officer carrying a weapon, or you're a person working at Domino's Pizza. Abuses of power happen because of social roles. Okay? Social roles give us some sort of authority. When you are in a room with a bunch of freshmen, do you have more authority than those freshmen? Absolutely. Do they recognize that? No, but you have more influence on them than you think they do. Now, some of them are just terrible people. Freshmen. They're awful. But you do have a central role and authority. Do people abuse their power? Do upperclassmen abuse their power with the little freshmen? Yeah. Absolutely. And you've seen it in the hallways before. Do people abuse their power in all different types of situations? Absolutely. So Social roles is the foundation of this experiment that we're going to talk about today. Have you guys heard of the Stanford prison experiment? Okay, so the guy who did the Stanford prison experiment, his name is Zimbardo. Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He worked at Stanford University. In the 1970s is when he did this. Now, you've seen Dr. Zimbardo before. You know how I did that Ames room? I showed you the Ames room? How when you looked at it through the window one, it looked like everything was fine. And then when you moved, like he grew at this crazy fast rate. The guy who said, lights, camera, that's Dr. Zimbardo. Now, Dr. Zimbardo is like a rock star in psychology because of this experiment. He's a rock star because of this experiment, because of how horrific it was. It's horrific because of the abuses of power. Now, when we talk about the Milgram experiment, who can quickly summarize the Milgram experiment? I taught you to do it last week. Milgram. Annie?
It's when the people thought they would know the future.
And what did we learn from it? Obedience. That people will kill other people knowingly to kill them. Is that pretty horrifying? Okay, so Zimbardo takes the envelope and does it even further, which is even more terrifying. So here is, by the way, and you can fill this out in your summary of Stanford Prison, which is on the back of your study guide. It's also number 11 on your focus. So while you're watching this, I am going to jump around because this video isn't just about the Stanford Prison experiment. It's looking at abuses of power and how the Stanford Prison experiment has shown abuses of power in other places. So there's going to be a little bit of that. Also, this is AP Psychology, which means I have more right to show you college-level content. The video I'm going to show you, they're cursing. There's some horrific things that happen in this video. You're not going to see it because it's a friendlier version. However, they are going to drop the F-bomb a couple of times. Hopefully, you'll be mature enough that you can handle it, because if not, then you will have to change the way I do a lot of other things, and I think you can because it hasn't been an issue so far. We're going to stop and we're going to talk about it as we go through. It is important that you understand how quickly this moves. Just like brown eyes versus blue eyes, how shocking it was that within 15 minutes they're already threatening violence, correct? This one's going to move at just as fast as a rate. So the main experimenter is Dr. Philip Zimbardo. It's at Stanford University. At the base of the psychology building on Stanford University's property, they're going to convert it into a prison. And here we go.
In 1971, in the basement of the psychology department of Stanford University, a mock prison was created. It rivaled all social psychology experiments in controversy.
Shortly after I finished this Stanford prison study, Milgram embraced me and said, "I'm so happy that you did this." He said, because now you can take off some of the heat that he's had to bear alone of having done the most unethical study.
Although this experiment is over 30 years old, its enduring power has been underscored by the events at.
See, they go in and talk about all the prison camps and stuff like that. We don't need to go into that.
How people respond to a cruel environment without clear rules.
I think he and everybody else who came down into that situation got caught up into that situation. And the sense that this was an experiment, that began to fade away. It became just life.
We frankly didn't anticipate what was going to happen. And we tried to really test the power of the environment to change and transform otherwise normal people, much as Milgram had changed or transformed otherwise normal people in an obedience situation. We wanted to do it in a prison-like situation.
Over 70 men volunteered for Zimbardo's experiment.
And they completed a battery of psychological tests. We picked 24 who were the most normal and most healthy. Half are going to be guards, half are going to be prisoners. And it's like flipping a coin. And heads, this one's a guard, this one's a prisoner. So at the beginning, there's no difference in the kinds of people who are in your two groups.
When we were given our jobs as guards, we were issued a uniform, which was a plain sort of khaki, lighter colored uniform.
So what's the foundation of the experiment? What is the foundation of the experiment, guys? You have to be able to lay it out there. What is it? With a hand, please. What do you got, Payne? No, what is the actual parameters of the experiment?
There's like 70 people there.
70? No.
That was 70.
There's 24.
Okay. 24, half became prisoners, half became guards.
How do they decide who's who?
Even
Coin flip. What does that show? Both sides are both what? Equal. You have a 50-50 shot of being a prisoner. You have a 50-50 shot of being a guard. Does that mean everyone in this prison is innocent? If you have a 50-50 shot, is everyone in this prison innocent? Yes, yes. No one here has done a crime, ladies and gentlemen. So when you go to like the Hillsborough County Jail and you see those people who some people have done terrible things, do you treat them with as much humanity? No, they probably don't get that much dignity. Is that right? No, but you know, you're like, these people are like murderers, child molesters, or they didn't pay their parking fee. You know, they're somewhere in between. Okay? So, wherever they fall, they've done something wrong. They've broken the law. Can we agree? Have these men done anything wrong? They are literally as innocent as one could be.
And then we gave them the symbols of power, handcuffs, a whistle, a big billy club. And then the other thing we gave them were silver reflecting sunglasses.
When you have mirror sunglasses on, then nobody can see your eyeballs. I think that anytime you put on what essentially is a mask and you mask your identity, then it allows you to behave in ways that you would not behave if you didn't have the mask on.
To make it more realistic, I had arranged with this Palo Alto Police Department to make mock arrests.
When I was arrested, it was a surprise to me. I didn't think I was going to be brought to an actual police station. I didn't think I was going to go through a booking process.
The guards then put a blindfold on them, stripped them naked, and then they put them in dresses, smocks with no underpants. Each had a number that replaced their name. They had to know the number, and they could only be referred to by that number. And they had a chain on one foot, which was put there to remind them at all times of their loss of freedom. So all of these things produces a sense of being dehumanized. On the first day, I said, this is not going to work. I mean, the guards felt awkward giving orders, and they'd say, okay, line up, repeat your numbers, and the prisoners start giggling.
Hey, I don't want anybody laughing. 3, 2, 1.
And then a very interesting thing happened. Dave Eshelman, who the prisoners named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
I decided that I would become the worst, most intimidating, cruel prison guard that I could possibly be.
I'm going to see in the future that you do work when you're told. Say it again. Say bless you, correction officer.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
We did have to do things like push-ups. We would have to sing things. At the beginning, we protested some of the actions. We did things to irritate the guards.
So the guards' authority was challenged right off the bat. And the guards had to decide how they were going to handle that. And they had to decide it without our input. I mean, again, this was not a Milgram study in which we were standing over them telling them what to do. And they began to see the prisoners' behavior as a kind of an affront to their authority. And they began to push back.
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this. The professor is the authority here. You know, he's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. You took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners. And so the guards formulated a plan to use fire extinguishers.
Okay, what did the first day in the prison look like? How, once the prisoners were brought in and all that stuff, how did the interaction goes between the prisoners and the guards? Who can Madison, what was it?
It was awkward at first.
Awkward. Were people taking you that serious?
Not really.
No, absolutely not. They were laughing, they were giggling, and all that stuff. What was the event that changed it to a more serious tone? What is the major event that took it from this awkward, giggling matter into something more serious? What was the major event?
Well, the one guy started like being more extreme and started like treating them like worse.
Absolutely. The guy who was referred to as like the John Wayne character, the Wild West guy. Now, when he's talking, does it sound like he's making excuses? Well, I just wanted to see, how they would let me behave. Don't worry, you'll be horrified by this man's behavior when you see the footage here in a second. It was a movie, yeah. Okay? So, what is the big event? So, John Wayne guy starts increasing the tension. What do the prisoners do? They start a rebellion, absolutely. And how did they break the rebellion? Hannah?
They took off their members and they made fun of themselves.
Okay, so that's how the rebellion's really going. But how do the officers break the rebellion, Nick?
They started treating them like dangerous criminals, and they
Absolutely, they break it physically, don't they? And then all of a sudden they start seeing them differently. And how do they see them, Nick?
like dangerous criminals.
Absolutely. There's a whole switch in front of this, like, oh my God, like this is awkward, like I'm in charge of you now. It's just like when you're given authority immediately in a class. Does anyone take you serious? If I left right now and said Mia's in charge, first of all, are we going to pay any attention to Mia? Absolutely not. Okay? But if Mia just like loses her mind on Matt and just tears him a new one, are we going to be like, damn? And you're probably going to listen to Mia a little bit more, correct? It's going to change the whole dynamic. It's going to be you against Mia now, correct? Haven't you seen that happen before? Okay? And that's exactly how it's going to happen. Thankfully, Mia is not going to have complete full reign. And I don't think Mia would do some of this stuff. But, okay, so this is day 2. So day 1, they have a rebellion, and it's broken physically. This is day 2. Keep in mind, this is supposed to go for 2 weeks. So this is supposed to go for 2 weeks. This is 1 day.
Doors down, dragged the prisoners out, stripped them naked, and essentially broke the rebellion in a purely physical way.
From that point on, the study was as remarkable a series of events as I've ever seen. It was a real laboratory for Zimbardo and I to watch human nature transformed in a very rapid way in the face of a very powerful situation.
People really suffered. I mean, guards did terrible things to the prisoners. They punished them by putting them in solitary confinement, which was a small closet. You could squat or stand, but you couldn't sit, and it was dark and dank, actually.
Every hour, every day, there's a teeny little bit more of an increment. And they're stepping up, taunting the prisoners. They're stepping up. The count's not letting them sleep. They're stepping up. I don't think from 1 minute to the next, the people who are in it see the change and see the difference.
And then the next key thing happened beside the rebellion. Prisoner 8612, he was the first one to have an emotional breakdown.
I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. To a doctor, anything. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside. Don't you know? I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm all fucked up inside. Help now!
At the time, if you would question me about the effect I was having, I would say, well, they must be a wimp. They're weak, or they're faking. Because I wouldn't have believed that what I was doing could actually cause somebody to have a nervous breakdown. It was just us sort of getting our jollies with it. Let's be like puppeteers here. Let's make these people do things.
What if I told you to get down on that floor? Fuck the floor. What would you do then?
The guards now began to escalate their use of power. Some of them had prisoners clean out toilet bowls with their bare hands. They now taunt, humiliate, degrade the prisoners in front of each other, and they exert arbitrary control over the prisoners.
They keep thinking of more and more unusual things to do. And very soon after the 4th day, things begin to turn sexual.
You be the bride of Frankenstein, and you be Frankenstein. I want you to walk over here like Frankenstein and say that you love the cool man.
If you want to fully sort of humiliate somebody, then you want to get them in those things that where their biggest fears are. And a lot of us have a lot of sexual hang-ups, and so that was part of that effort to humiliate them even further.
Get up, Claude. I love you, too, I love you, too, You're smart, too, Who gets out here and do 10 push-ups?
The guards knew that had the coin come up heads rather than tails, they would have had the dress on rather than the uniform on. They knew that. So they certainly knew that the prisoners who were being mistreated had done nothing wrong to deserve the mistreatment. And yet the roles themselves were so powerful and the environment itself was so powerful that they ended up punishing those prisoners as though they had done something wrong.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
We were told to chant something about how he was a bad prisoner. And at the time I went along with it, I'm thinking, what does this matter? We don't believe this, but we can go along and chant it.
Because of what prisoner 819 did, myself and the rest. Because of what prisoner 819 did, myself and the rest.
That night, he had a breakdown. Every day after that, another prisoner broke down in a similar way. Broke down. I mean, extreme stress reaction. We released another one on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Nobody who was in that study could deny that the prisoner breakdowns were genuine. They were scary to see. They were upsetting to us. They were unexpected, but they were very clearly the real thing. At some level, we understood that something was happening that we were no longer in control of. It was damaging people. We didn't quite have a grasp on what to do about it. One of the mistakes we made was that we hadn't built in time to step back and to look at what was happening and call it what it was, which was mistreatment. We were caught up in the events that were taking place.
Or you can keep your blankets, and 416 will stay in another day. We got 3, guess one. Keep your blankets, 416, you're going to be in there for a while. So just get used to it.
On the 5th day of the study, Zimbardo invited his girlfriend, recent psychology graduate Christina Maslach, to visit the mock prison.
I had heard bits and pieces from Phil about what was going on. And then when I was down there that evening, it really was kind of a wow. The thing that really got to me was when some of the guards took the prisoners down the hall to the men's room.
She looks out and sees a line of the prisoners with paper bags over their heads, each one holding the other one's shoulder.
And they're leading them down the hall. And Phil comes over and I look, my God, look at that. And I looked up and something about it just, again, it was the dehumanizing, demeaning kind of treatment. I couldn't watch it.
And she said, it's terrible what you're doing to those boys. And she got tears in her eyes. I said, what? And she runs out. And I'm furious. I'm saying, look, this is, I run outside, we have this big argument. I'm saying, look, this is dynamics of human behavior. Look, it's fascinating, power of the situation. So I'm giving her all the psychological basis and what kind of psychologist are you? You don't appreciate this. And she said,
I don't understand. You're a stranger to me. I don't understand this. How could you not see what I see? I mean, you're a caring, compassionate person. I know you from all the other things. Something's gone wrong here.
And then the next thing she said, which had an equally big impact, is, I'm not sure I want to, have anything to do with you if this is the real you. And that was like a slap in the face, because what she was saying is, you've changed. The power of the situation has transformed you from the person I thought I knew to this person that I don't know. And at that moment I said, wow, you're right. We got to end it.
After only 6 days, Dr. Zimbardo shut down his experiment.
Okay? So when we're talking about this experiment, this experiment's supposed to last for 14 days. It gets shut down it's like 4 hours into the 6th day and it completely closes. Now, what this video does not go into that much detail about is that the types of acts that they're asking these men to do to each other in this prisoner. They talk about how they are forced to clean the toilet bowls with their hands. They actually make them drink out of their toilet bowls. Out of dirty toilet bowls that have not been flushed. They make each other touch each other in different ways because they can. There's even the threat of sodomy at a couple of points. 2 people were in isolation in that dark, damp closet for about a total of almost 43 hours each. Now keep in mind, when they walked in these doors on the first day, were they equals? Essentially, in front of the law. However, one was given the authority of your police officers, while the other one were given the title of prisoners. Was there really any difference between the two? Absolutely not. What this experiment shows us is that with social role comes abuses of power. With authority comes power. And that if you have authority that goes unchecked, it will lead to abuse of power. These are normal people at Stanford University. Think about it. They're some of the brightest people in the country. Stanford is a hell of a university. Everyone in this room, including myself, would be damn glad to be in there. True or not true? And here they are doing these terrible, horrible things. They're just normal people. That these normal people could do such terrible things for their own entertainment. And that abuse of power goes straight ahead without it being checked. Isn't that terrifying? That for your own entertainment you would do these things to other people. And that's exactly what this experiment shows us. Now, it is important to know that my man here, Zimbardo, the minute this experiment happens, he gets removed from Stanford University. Why is this a huge ethical issue? Why is the Stanford prison an ethical issue? What is something terribly wrong with this experiment? Skylar. You couldn't leave. You couldn't leave. Okay? You couldn't leave because Zimbardo wouldn't let you leave. He saw himself as the warden. He saw himself trying to manipulate people into staying because he enjoyed the psychology of it all. Yes. What else is another ethical issue? Annie? Absolutely. Physical and mental stress, damage. Absolutely. Milgram's was a mental stress. Can you agree? All right. That was like, oh my God, I'm going to kill this person if I keep going. That's a mental stress. These people are going through both physical and mental stress. Okay? You can't do that to your participants. Was there anyone overseeing the experiment that was not involved in the experiment? Mm-mm. And that is a huge no-no. So what happens is the moment this experiment comes clear to Stanford University, Zimbardo loses his job immediately. Then the APA, the American Psychological Association, who's in charge of all experiments across the nation, very, very highly esteemed professional group, calls him in front of the board, and they almost pull off his license. Now remember, he's a doctor. He's a doctor in psychology. They were going to strip him of his license to practice and of his doctorate, which he spent almost 10 years trying to get here. Okay. However, at the very end, they decided to not pull his license. Okay. Now, if they pulled his license, he would have gone to criminal court. In a criminal court, he could have gone up to 15 years in prison for false imprisonment. True or not true? Were they allowed to leave? Did they believe that they were in danger? Absolutely. He didn't get arrested because the APA did not officially say that he broke with the experiment. However, he is going to be punished for quite some time. Now he's kind of a rock star. Can we agree? Like, the experiment is fascinating to see that normal people like you and I, given unchecked power, will do horrific things. So when you think about Hitler, think about Stalin, you think about the terrible people on the earth, just think about it. The only reason they did those things is because they came without check. Isn't that crazy? That you could do terrible things too, and that's what it shows you. Eventually, Zimbardo obviously moves past it. He becomes a rock star of psychology. However, it's shocking. And people don't like, isn't it uncomfortable knowing that you could do that? It's terrible. Yes?
So what you're saying is that if he continued on for the full, like, 2 weeks,
He absolutely would have been. He would have lost his license. He'd be sitting in jail somewhere.
so essentially his girlfriend saved him.
Absolutely. And made him incredibly famous because of it. He's a millionaire now. Yes.
Did he not have to check with the board before
He did check with the board, but he, since this experiment, the APA has been way more involved. In the 1980s, they do a whole tweaking of the APA guidelines that you have to do. Like, for instance, I did, for my master's, I had to do an experiment on, I had to do research for my master's, for my thesis, and I was just testing kids, doing different strategies to get kids to read better, what would motivate them more. So nothing crazy. Can we agree? And I had to apply to the APA with all the guidelines and how I was going to collect all my data and how involved it was going to be and submit it to them. And they had to approve it. So now it's much more involved, and obviously this is a pretty shallow thing. Can we agree? Motivation for better reading scores? Come on, it's not crazy. So depending on the depth of your experiment, depends on your ethical guidelines. Now in the 1980s, in great regard to this experiment, how can we protect participants from this in the future? And now it's much more rigorous. So lots of things have changed because of it. Yes?
No, but like, didn't they have to spend that time building the prison, like in the basement?
Yeah, it wasn't just a last minute thing.
No,
They
but,
planned
like,
for
so
it.
the school let him get that far.
The school knew what was happening, but even Zimbardo said it was you couldn't see the changes because you were too involved. There was no one overseeing it. When you have an experiment and you're dealing with people, you have to have someone who just oversees everything, not participating in it. Everyone good? All right, so let's do something a little lighter, shall we? So for social learning, here is our smoke-filled room. This is bystander effect, by the way. All right, so here's a chick. She's being brought into a room. The experiment is whether or not a person will report if smoke is filling a room. How timely is this today, by the way, since we have smoke in the gym? So this woman is put into a room all by herself, and in the corner of the room, she sees smoke. She goes over, investigates it. She's walking pretty calmly. Would you walk that calmly if there was smoke billowing into your room? I wouldn't. I think I'd have a little more step. And then she leaves the room and she reports it. This all happens within her 30 seconds of her seeing it. Makes sense, correct? Here's another chick. Now she is sitting in a room with about 6 other Confederates. What's a Confederate? Someone who's in on it. The Confederates were told not to respond to the smoke. So she's sitting there filling out her paperwork. The Confederates are sitting there filling out her paperwork. She looks up and she sees the smoke billowing in. None of the Confederates are responding to it. How long do you think she'll wait? Like a minute? 2 minutes? Huh? Well, how about 15 minutes? No, it's bystander effect. If everyone else is acting calmly about it, people won't
They
report.
probably know that. They probably know that smoke is in the corner of the room. She's worried.
I know. I don't know why you wouldn't turn to the person next to you in 20 minutes. At the 20-minute mark, another Confederate comes in the room and takes her out. What this experiment shows us is that we will sit and we will wait until someone else recognizes our fears, and then we'll respond. Isn't that insane? All right.
Are they allowed to like look at it, the Confederates?
No, they weren't. They were supposed to focus on their paper. And that was the only thing they were supposed to do. All right, so let's get to it then. So yesterday we started talking about altruism. Okay? Altruism is pro-social behavior that is done without expecting expectation of reward. It may involve risk or harm. I am involved in an altruistic thing. I do something every single day with no expectation of reward, and it's when I go to the dog park and pick up every single turd left behind. The reason why I pick up every single turd left behind is so my man Toby doesn't eat it, because he's a big jerk and he loves turds. So I'm getting a reward, as in I don't have to go to the vet and pay money, but am I expecting people to high-five me? No. Am I bitter when I do it? Yeah, I just don't understand why people can't pick up after the dogs, but technically that's altruistic. If you volunteered at the hospital to get your minimal 100 hours for community service, isn't that what it is? Or whatever it is, and you just enjoyed it, so you kept going, every Wednesday or whatever day you did it, that's altruism. You're not getting anything out of it, you just enjoy it, so you keep doing it. That's it. So bystander effect. Bystander effect is referring to the effect that the presence of other people has on the decision to help or not help, becoming less likely as the number of bystander increases. Now, think about that video clip I just showed you. The woman who is in a room all by herself. Immediately, what does she do when she sees the smoke? She gets up, she goes, checks it out, and leaves the room and reports it immediately. She has no one else to depend on. She has to depend on herself, so she immediately responds. The chick in the room with a bunch of Confederates, what does she do? She looks around at others and waits for other people to respond. Bystander effect. If other people started responding to the smoke, guess what she would do? Respond, absolutely. If no one responds, then she's not going to respond either. Bystander effect. There's one very, very famous example. Okay? It's about a woman in New York City in the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s. And she, in the middle of July, August, and that's important because all the windows in New York City are open because it's hot. And it's early 70s, 80s, so there's no air conditioning at that point. So, all the windows are open, and this lady is walking in front of her own apartment building, by the way, and she gets jumped by some guy. She starts screaming, help, 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 right outside of her building, okay? People look out of the building, and the assailant sees people looking out the window and leaves her alone. He stands in the bushes and waits for a couple minutes, but no one comes down, and there's no police sirens. She's screaming in the bushes, in the trash pile in front. He comes back after a couple minutes waiting in the wings because no one's coming, rapes her, murders her, and 38 people know it was happening. Every single person in that building knew what was happening and expected other people to call. Real life story. Isn't that horrific? It's a real life story. Okay? That's called diffusion of responsibility. Have a good day!
That's something that happened to me the other night. Not that story, but it happened because I was in Orlando with my friend and we were driving and we like this